So, welcome. In this webinar, we are going to be exploring the big changes we're going through. And I see this as a great opportunity to not only rebalance in most areas of life, but also to reclaim overlooked aspects of ourselves while also improving our quality of life. We can see that the world's falling apart around us as we shed the past ways of living that no longer work. I'm not a fan of mindless optimism. However, I like the hidden aspects of these challenging times and what they can bring us. And that's what I want to show you more about today. I have sought my entire life to understand about how culture works because it's so painful for so many. And it is why I work at understanding the underlying dynamics driving culture. I grew up in an environment that was plainly miserable, but I also knew it didn't have to be that way. And so one of my purposes in life is to illuminate and release us from the unnecessary miseries so that we can have more quality of life and, of course, some more joy. This is not an easy time with so many claims on our time and energy, so many conflicts that seem unresolvable, and so many serious issues that need to be addressed. We can make it easier on ourselves by being informed and clear. Our voices get stifled, pushed aside, and appropriated in many ways by a high conflict world. However, we also live in a time of such significant transformation that we can reshape how we use our time, our energy, our interests, and our commitments. And once you see the lay of the land, I hope it will be easier to see where the hope is. So culturally and personally, I think that one of the things that we need, we don't talk about it a whole lot, is trust. It's one of our most important needs. And the extent to which it's there makes a huge difference in our ability to solve problems together and to have real security, not the security we purchase through weapons. And ultimately, the more we can trust, the easier life works. Trust fosters abundance, and distrust blocks connection and cooperation, creating scarcity. We feel it and experience it because it makes it hard to get anything done when there's a lot of distrust. Trust is like social grease, and distrust creates walls. We don't control the conditions in the world creating distrust. So we help ourselves when we make self-trust and social trust a top priority to invite greater ease into these challenging times. And one of the points of today's is to talk about how we can create more self-trust and trust for ourselves. We are inundated with so many crises, dramas, and conflicts that it can feel like we have no place to breathe. We can feel vulnerable because there's so much rejection built into the social dynamics right now, and so much fighting about who has a say and who does not. Space and who gets space or not is an important tool of control. We have the opportunity to change the narrative about space, what we have space for, including ourselves, our real needs, each other, the needs of nature, and ideally some play and joy, which have been neglected in many ways for a long time. We will need play and joy to establish a new humane world. And one of the things I want to point out is that one of our greatest needs is to become more practical. And the more that we do, the more we have space for that which is good in life. So one of the most important issues that we have to resolve in order to right the ship in the world is the way that we're continually being squeezed by a profit-oriented system that devalues nature and people. And we'll discuss this. But first, I want to give you what I think are the keys to be aware of at this time so that you're knowledgeable and prepared and can feel comfortable that you're taking good care of yourself while embracing, adapting to change in a good way. So this is what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be covering the 5 risks. That will be our first stop. The story through culture, key takeaways from that, tending a revolution in how we show up, what we can do to make life better for ourselves in 2024, and a new North Star. That will be where we finish off today. So let's talk about the 5 risks. So one of the first and most important is not understanding the nature of these transformational times. And I think that in a lot of ways, it's almost impossible to really understand the full and fully grasp the extent to which we're going through a major transformation. And one of the issues is that we don't do this very frequently. In fact, we've never been where we are now in the past. So we don't know how to embrace change at a cultural level as a natural part of life, nor have we learned how to work with it so that we can make it less traumatic. I consider it a new skill we have to develop. This current change will restructure our lives on many levels, which makes it a more fundamental and foundational change than just a systemic change. We're going through it almost like a total overhaul, and you'll see why shortly. We are getting the opportunity to rewrite the human story on a more humane basis. And that's going to make thriving much easier because it means a shift in our values, in our foundational values. And I think with it, it brings a lot of hope. The next thing we have to be aware of is that we need to take this change seriously, and not doing so is a big liability because it is bigger than you realize. We have arrived at a special juncture in our history, and which I will show you. And if we could stop fighting long enough, we would see that our efforts over thousands of years have brought us to a point where we can actually change our priorities to more nourishing ones. Survival has been our cultural story. It's an adversarial energy, and it's ending as our primary social glue. And we will be restructuring in many ways to invite a new story. Now we need to pull back from business as usual. It's one of the most important things you can do right now, and shift your time, energy, and resources to the needed changes. Not doing so will result in just propping up a dying system and not giving a new system the support it needs. And there are big consequences for that. Next, looking for short-term fixes for deeper issues. We have completed the story of survival, and we now must begin a new one. I believe it's going to be based on thriving, and that will result in a very different cultural system. Thriving is not survival with money. That's how a lot of people think of it. Because thriving in a world that suffers from depletion requires cooperation and collaboration. We have to rebalance our relationship with nature. Thriving requires an ecological mindset more than an adversarial one. So an ecologically oriented culture requires that we connect and co-create together. We must open up. We need to reduce fear, which means that the fear-based world will lose the leverage of scarcity. And that's something they're not particularly happy about right now. There is a reason for so many crises. They keep our time, energy, and resources focused on problems rather than the shift to a new foundation around creating well-being and thriving. And Band-Aids will not fix a culture that is no longer serving us. Distractions won't help either. You can't avoid the change that we're going through. So we might as well embrace it and make it into something wonderful. And that's basically what we're trying to do here. The next is thinking that technology will solve everything when it cannot. Technology has done a lot and will continue to do so, but there are things it can't do. It can't miraculously replace a tree that has been cut down. It can't make you feel vigorous when you're burnt out. It cannot restore trust when it's been damaged. These are practical, personal, physical, and social needs that technology will not satisfy. Many of these needs have been neglected for a long time and are demanding our attention. These issues have been created by neglect, overconsumption, by treating nature and people as consumable resources. You've probably felt it, and we'll talk about developing new skills to change this later. And then not developing a plan or a strategy to make change work for you. Now, this is a bit of a gotcha because we don't really know all of the change going on and where it's going to take us. And that means we're wise to leave space in our lives for the fact that there will be surprises. Our culture right now consumes our time and energy mercilessly, and that does not work during times of change. So each of us must take ownership of our time, our energy, and our other resources if we want to make the journey to a healthier world and have it be a rewarding experience. So we will explore solutions, but first I want to take you on a short journey through human history and the cultures we've created so you can begin to have a big picture understanding about what we've created. And so you can grasp the cultural shift we're going through and have it make sense for you. And once you have this understanding, you will find it much easier to feel in control of your life, in spite of all the challenges we're experiencing. There's so much noise that it can be really hard for us to discern what is actually going on and what choices to make. So let's start talking about that. So this is a chart of the journey of human beings through culture to where we are today and actually beyond. It's based on the work of psychology professor and researcher Dr. Clare Graves at Utica College, who is now deceased. His work identified the patterns of human cultural systems as we have evolved over the centuries. Understanding the patterns provides us with clarity, which gives us the deeper lay of the land and brings us more self-confidence as a result. And it becomes an inner resource that you can use as you're moving forward in spite of all the changes that are going on. This chart shows the groupings of the cultural systems, and I'm going to leave up this chart and I will just go through each one of these systems very briefly so you have an understanding. Each group of six of these cultural systems has an overarching theme called a tier, and the theme up until now has been survival. The blue line is where the tier ends and the survival story ends, and a new one begins. And this is why these times are so important. We are changing our fundamental story, and this is the only first time in human history that we're doing so. So this makes it a challenging and an amazing time. You can feel it in the air, the feeling of being at the edge of something and not knowing what comes next. It can feel very precarious, but it also can feel exciting if you understand that this is actually a good thing that we're going through. Each system is the dominant system for a time, and it's created to address specific problems and realities, and it's eventually replaced by a new system to address new problems and realities. Our cultural systems operate like a baby learning to crawl, stand, and walk. Each system is a new step. X marks the spot where we are now. We are entering the last cultural system of the survival theme of Tier 1, and probably also the first cultural system of the second tier to a new system, which I suspect the theme will be thriving. And it's a very different way of living structurally, socially, and energetically. It's a different story, and we're getting ready to write it, so it's an exciting time. It's a very big transition with lots of change and many new skills to learn. You will be writing the story. So Dr. Clare Graves, who discovered these patterns, identified them as what he's called meme systems, which means they're memes, which we know about from social media, but they're at a cultural level. And we won't get into depth about them because we only have limited time today. But it's important to understand these systems as memes and that people get their identities and belonging from them. And that's where a lot of resistance to change comes from. So we have this group of systems that are part of a larger story of survival. And each individual system then is like an episode of the larger story of survival. And that's one way to think about it. Each is an episode of a larger story and it has its own purpose. And that's important to understand this because we think of culture as our support system and even our anchor. But it's actually a temporary human project meant to help us solve problems and develop skills as we progress as a species. Cultural systems are meant to be temporary because they're created to solve a specific but temporary problem. They're essentially projects on a large scale. And once you understand a culture as a project with a beginning and an end, then you begin to have some perspective on it, and you can detach from some of the negativity that's going on as we go through the changes we're going through. The chart is V-shaped because each stage develops new skills along a track, building on the skills developed in earlier systems. And because each stage is focused on one type of development and limited in its purpose at any time, you will find those who see the limits of the current system, they're already looking to develop the skills for the next stage. Because it takes a long time for a new system to develop and become viable. This pattern of alternation is actually good for us because it does create space for the new to be developed and emerge, but with the protection of being under the radar. So this is one time when being invisible is not always a bad thing. The project of creating a system to replace capitalism has been underway for a long time, hundreds of years, and it's about ready to take its place as the new dominant system. So now we're going to go through the evolutional story, and we'll start with beige. I'm going to identify them by their shorthand name, and that's the color you see, and we'll go through them, and I'll show you the patterns. And I want you to understand not only what they are, but also how they're useful to us. And I'm also going to talk about the shames that we inherit from these particular systems, because that's an important part of our shift from the first tier survival story into the new story of thriving. So the beige stage is the earliest stage. It began approximately 100,000 years ago with cave dwellers and hunter-gatherers. They began as small, loose, nomadic bands that moved around to find food like berries and game. Their energy is consumed by basically looking for food and avoiding getting killed. So basically on basic survival. And at this stage, people have to keep it real, which is one of its great virtues. They pay a lot of attention to their environment and notice minute changes in their surroundings. So they have to read changes in vegetation, footprints, and all of that. And as we end this first tier survival story, which we're in the process of doing, we will need to reground ourselves and get back to basics by reevaluating what we've accomplished to date, which is a lot, and come to terms with what is dysfunctional and unhealthy. So this is a very practical, low-fuss stage that sticks to the knitting in life. It's very important for us at this point to value this particular stage and what it brings to us as we have to let go of this old story and reinvent a new one. And I think it's very underrated in terms of its value. We have lost our connection with groundedness, practicality, and nature. And I think for all the social noise and all the other kinds of noise going on, it's practicality we have lost, practicality that we have to reclaim. And so our path out of this current mess we're in is going to involve a lot of practicality. And I actually think that's a good thing and it's going to feel good. Right now, our hypervigilance is applied to the nuances of human hierarchy and social competition, while we ignore the realities of the Earth's decline. So this stage offers us clues about how to reground, tune into our sensory intelligence, and reconsider what matters as we transition out of the survival agenda of the first tier. So asking yourself the question, what is important for a thriving world, will help you make this shift. That's a good one. It'll start to help you develop an idea of what is practical right now. So that's a good question to ask yourself. And it's worth considering how the grounded practicality of this stage can actually serve you. Don't be afraid of letting go of all the complexity and all the so-called sophistication and getting regrounded and practical in a simple way. So the next stage is the purple tribal stage, which is estimated to have begun about 50,000 years ago. The hunter-gatherer beige stage is individualistic. The tribe is the first communal stage, and it's the foundation of all the communal systems. Whereas the beige system connects us with our dependence on the earth, the purple tribal stage connects us with how we depend on each other. So it's a very important stage. What happens is that these hunter-gatherer groups at the beige stage, maybe they become too large, or they've learned some farming, and they start to think about putting down roots because it's hard to bring your harvests or so many people with you if you're nomadic, and that doesn't work anymore. And that's when cultures change. They change when something doesn't work anymore, like right now. So they form a larger group, a tribe, which is a group of families. They create the basis for trust among people who did not know each other. They develop reciprocity as the basis of trust. And that means a set of obligations for all group members, but only their group. Loyalty to the tribe is mandatory and disloyalty severely punished. Loyalty demands are part of the price of belonging, along with adhering to social norms. So shaming and other consequences come from perceived disloyalty. Daily life in a tribe is about maintaining relationships, doing the basic work of the tribe, and also about the work of creating and putting on the rituals for the various times of the year and the various events that cement the tribe. It's the work of community. So the basic purpose of the tribe, in addition to taking care of basic necessities, is creating a shared language, group norms, reciprocal obligations, and rituals for connection. The tribal community is still closely connected to nature, and so there is a connected, flowing groundedness that comes with tribes that later communal stages can lack, and that's something we're going to have to try and reclaim. The spirit of wonder that we all have as children is one of the pronounced qualities of people in the tribe. They create a story about how they came to be, who their ancestors are, and stories about animals and plants from their close connection with nature. And these stories become their truth about life and inform their choices. They become a way of bonding and of teaching. One of the better known examples is Aboriginal Dreamtime. And this matters because there is a story that gets created at the communal level, and we're going to need to create new stories around thriving. The tribal world will have important gifts for us in developing new cultures of thriving and new rituals and stories to support them because of its connection with the aliveness of nature, sense of wonder, and intuitive skills. We will need to rethink and consider how we can create a common language of story and rituals for a new system. So considering what we can learn from our tribes is important for us as we create a world based on a new theme of thriving. Now, the next is the red system. It's the empire system, the gang, the mafia. It's thought to have begun about 10,000 years ago. And I want to point out there's a relationship between communal and individualistic systems that's often not recognized. Communal systems provide a base or a foundation for a group, and then the individualistic systems use that to expand. And that expansion is meant to enrich everyone, but often goes wrong when the newfound wealth only benefits a few, which is the case in this very exploitive system. Exploitation is an important source of shame, and it's in the shadow in our authoritarian hierarchical systems, which are adept at rationalizing and maintaining their exploitive ways. So the exposure of these patterns for correction is part of what's happening now. So it's important that you understand that's part of the dynamic going on in a lot of the conflict. Individuals at this red empire stage feel less fear and allegiance to the ancestors and the tribes for one reason or another. And whatever the impetus, they discover their own power and they go out into the world. It's a rough and primitive way of life, and the capabilities they develop are mainly physical skills with a heavy emphasis on fighting, engineering projects, and building monuments to emperors. We all have our thing. People at this stage are risk takers, but that doesn't mean they're wise. Their physical skills are manifested in ancient structures like the Colosseum, pyramids, and conquest, of course. So the stage actually does benefit the world to a degree, but its aggression is very destructive and it's very much an ego trip. So they developed impressive engineering and building skills, but a lot of what they did not benefit the common good. It is a warrior system within the cultural structure of an empire. Every day in this system is a conquest to best someone or something. Life is considered a test in a jungle full of dangers, and you want to be the strong one who emerges victorious. You're alone in a harsh world, and the mindset is that life is about survival of the fittest. Red people have a strong conquest drive. The energy is conquering. You can feel that in people who live at this stage. You feel that desire they have to conquer. And the shame is about losing the contest. So people who are at the red stage get very upset and shamed if they lose. So it's a shame. It's a shame about losing the contest. It's also a shame around weakness and pride. So that's something to keep in mind. Red conquerors treat their conquests like slaves. They don't like rules or constraints, but they have no problem exploiting you. Red people are brash and short-sighted, but they're also creative in trying new ideas and testing limits. We see some of that testing of limits going on right now. Red is the home of machismo, testing oneself, heroism, and conquest. Grandiosity and brutality are common. This is a difficult stage for most people. I'm not particularly fond of it. What is good about it is that it values initiative and creativity. People at this stage will take risks, but many of the risks are just impulsiveness. And so if we can develop wise risk-taking, that would be a good thing. One thing that is wonderful about it is it's all in energy. We have lost that with authoritarianism, perfectionism, and ridiculous busyness. So many of us have learned to be defensive and doubt ourselves. This stage has the refreshing quality of a natural confidence. Now, it may not be right, it may not be warranted, and often isn't, but it's there. And when we're looking to develop our confidence, we're really looking to bring back into our lives the confidence that people at this stage have. So if we can tie that all in confidence, the good in ourselves, each other, and life, we really will have something. And that would be something to think about doing for yourself. So the next stage is the blue authoritarian one. When people get tired of the red destructiveness, they have to invent a new stage to control it. And in comes the blue authoritarian stage, excuse me. It's the second communal system. It began approximately 5,000 years ago. And since these levels expand both our capabilities and inclusion, this next stage goes from a community of families of the tribe to a community of people who believe in the one true way. In other words, true believers. So the blue authoritarian stage is one that some people love, but many hate because of its rigidity and dogma. This stage teaches and enforces obedience. No discussion is allowed. But to get obedience, you have to have something to get people to be obedient to, and dogma is the tool of choice. On the plus side, it has created an institutional foundation for human activity and greater prosperity that we have now. But a huge negative is that it is highly controlling, hates creativity, and undermines unusual and out-of-the-box initiatives. Blue loves the box. So shame is tied to being outside the box, thinking for yourself, being different, and being aware. Many people have lost contact with important aspects of themselves because of the stage, including their no muscle, and important lost qualities like wonder, curiosity, and creativity from earlier stages, because this stage suppresses all that. And we need to reclaim them to become co-creators and move into the next steps in human and cultural development. The demands for obedience of the blue world shut those qualities down. The idea behind this stage is to sacrifice now to enjoy later, and a certain amount of deferred gratification is an important skill to have. The hero drive of the prior stage is transformed in the service of the one true way. And so the red conqueror becomes the blue crusader, and they get the added relief of no longer having to figure everything out because they have a dogma that tells them what to do. Blue is authoritarian and hierarchical. Under the blue system, everybody has their place, there are rules, and one is punished for disobedience and deviating from whatever the rules are. And what that means is that there is an order as long as you stay in your place. In essence, you create security for others by staying in your place. And every system of belonging has its price. It's important to understand that. People at this stage are often called the salt of the earth because they are very down-to-earth people and often humble. And that's an important quality that we're going to be needing as we have to reduce our overconsumption in the world. There's a predictability at this stage, which helps people feel comfortable, especially after the destructiveness of the prior system. So for some, the order is relief, and life seems to have a purpose again. However, the intolerance and self-sacrifice creates problems, and the authority of the authoritarian system gets questioned when the authority is wrong, and that erodes trust. That's one of the things that's showing up in the world right now with this reactivation of authoritarianism. We're getting to see how wrong authoritarians can be. So it's important to notice that authoritarians can be very demanding of your compliance, but wisdom is not their strong suit. So over time, some people begin to want to live by their own authority again when they see that. And that's when they move into the next system, which is called the orange one, which is the entrepreneurial system that we know today. It's achievement-oriented, it's entrepreneurial, capitalism. Orange is the meme system we're in, and the system we're most familiar with. It began approximately 1,000 years ago. I have a feeling these things are speeding up. So, that's interesting to see how fast we will go into new stages. The Age of Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and democracy are all part of the Orange Age. And it's important to realize that democracy is foundational for the new theme of thriving, which requires a different set of skills. So during the prior authoritarian system, the blue one, some adventurous souls sought to understand the world better because they noticed that authoritarians were often wrong. And they began to explore the natural world. They developed various scientific disciplines like astronomy, geology, biology, etc. And over time, they developed a scientific process, which was created so that they could begin to understand facts and verify them and provide an independent means of verifying things, independent of the desires or dogmas or agendas of the earlier human systems. So science is fact-seeking. It became a tool to help people move out of the stifling dogmatic blue authoritarian system and a way to move forward. Science investigates events in physical reality and then develops ideas and theories about what it sees. It is very materialistic, though. That's something to keep in mind. So this particular new entrepreneurial system offered people more autonomy, but you still need some support and co-workers and a way to manage risks. And science is the way that helps people to do that. And it's been very successful in creating the foundation for material well-being. That is what it has been up to. So people at the orange level are self-motivated and interested in progress and accomplishment, where red is about conquest and the macho hero, in blue, the one true way of crusading hero. Orange reveres the Horatio Alger self-made hero, the entrepreneur who creates something against the odds. It's the third individualistic meme. It reinvents the hero and applies it primarily to commerce. People in orange can be very brash and combative like red, although it's more sophisticated and shows up in social competition and the clash of ideas. Often people here are self-absorbed and not at all altruistic unless it serves their interests because they believe in individualistic autonomy. It is an individualistic system. On the plus side, though, it's more open to multiplicity, in other words, variety, because it develops many markets and the complex organizations that serve them. So it's less rigid than blue and it's more creative. However, large organizations and markets can be perfectionistic, which means some of the harsh perfectionism of past systems can be felt in punishing productivity demands. Most of us have experienced that. Daily life in this system can feel like a grind. Since this stage is capitalism, which is also the industrial age, the energy of this stage is the energy of the machine. Orange life is about seeking success and status, and thinks life is all about winning an image. People at the fake it till you make it orange level do not like anybody encroaching on them and dislike any neediness from others, because that means they may lose their place on the success ladder. Time is precious in the orange system. Like red, it's a lonely meme system filled with contests and judgments and the need to avoid losing the upper hand in a dog-eat-dog competition. There's a lot of shame about vulnerability and need in this particular system. But when the loneliness and exhaustion take their toll, people start to turn to the next stage, which is green, and that's egalitarian. So the orange system cultivates some important qualities that we're going to need to carry forward. The ability to build something and be part of building something. But I don't think the new building is going to be as hierarchical as it's been. We're going to need to build something together in a more ecological way. So that's going to be interesting. And it also recognizes differences in a way that's not been allowed in the past and sets the stage for the inclusivity of the next system. So green is the last one before we move into the second tier. It's emergent. It's the new third communal meme. It began approximately 150 years ago, and it seeks to promote unity and community among all and liberate us from dogma and greed. So that's a tall order. It invents a humane hero, and it's the final stage of this story of survival, and I call it a culminating meme system. So basically, this is where the rubber meets the road. We have to clean things up. It has a communal energy of acceptance and non-judgment. It's consensual, where the purple communal meme is about us versus them and family focused, and the blue meme system is communal around the one true way. Green is all about the inclusiveness of everyone and everything. So everyone is beautiful in their own way, is the saying. In this particular stage, community includes everyone and everything as a member. It's about learning to be, healing inner wounds in oneself, as well as healing the damage to animals and the planet. It seeks consensus in all decisions and having all voices heard. So it's very democratic and invites more social acceptance. So many people enter this stage exhausted from too much work or stuff. How many of us have felt exhausted from too much work? So centering, healing, and practices like meditation become a big part of this life and this particular stage. There is a lot of shame around rejection, which is often perceived with some justification as being about prejudice of some kind. But the hierarchical authoritarian systems, this is something to understand. Rejection is one of their tools of control because they have control over people, and people have their place within the hierarchy. Rejection becomes an important tool of control. It's not necessarily based on merit. So there's a lot of wounding and a lot of shame around rejection that has to be healed at this particular stage. It's emerging when the harm to people in the earth is in great need of repair. And it has a formidable task to manage a transition to inclusiveness, equality, and the healing of the planet and people all at once. It's the most empathetic so far because it invests in healing as part of its purpose. But all of the hurt feelings from thousands of years of injustices surfacing all at once can be hard to take and to live with. Hierarchies in authoritarian systems shift responsibility and risk to those of lower rank. And with that comes a shame that's in our cultural shadow. And I personally think we can't escape this social reckoning and that it would be good for us to deal with it. Authoritarians are blocking this necessary accountability. Eventually, I think they're going to have to give way. So this stage promotes togetherness, harmony, and acceptance. It's okay to be different. However, green struggles with decision-making because what it doesn't grasp is the source of conflicts between people because they come from different cultural systems. And so the demands of harmony, they take a lot of energy. but often they don't necessarily get where people want to go. They don't get to the resolution, to the kumbaya that everyone would love to see. And so when people are dissatisfied, they start to look for new solutions to solve the challenges of harmony and diversity. And they're ready for the next stage, which is actually the next tier, and learning about patterns and how to work with them. So this stage is evident in the Western world, mostly in European countries, but not everywhere. And we are at the end of the survival story as our primary narrative, and so it's a transitioning system. We will have to heal and let go of all the sins of the past and take with us into the future the gifts of the earlier systems. However, because of the delays in addressing climate and environmental issues, some, including myself, think we will have to combine the transition to green and the next one yellow simultaneously. So let's look at yellow. So we talked about beige. Beige is the first tier. So yellow is basically going to be like beige at based on a new theme, which I think will be thriving. So it began about 50 to 70 years ago, maybe a little longer. There were a lot of efforts like Dr. Graves to understand patterns that are creating the problems in human life. I remember that when I was young, there were lots of different people trying to come up with patterns to try to understand where conflict and differences came from. The green stage offers inclusiveness and healing of inequities, but life needs to work, and healing wounds is not the same as getting something done. So all of the social conflicts of the first tier, but they start to diminish in importance, and they start to be replaced by just being here and enjoying the magnificence of life. Living simply and appreciatively is more important than anything else. Fighting gives way to cherishing our lives, and I think we desperately need that. So it's a starting over meme system. It's inner-directed, doesn't need glory, it doesn't care about social competition. It learns where and what it needs to live simply. It's not self-sacrificing, and it's not splashy either. It's a very grounded meme. It has a kind of inner-directed autonomy. Authenticity was the word of the year, at least I think here in the United States. I don't think authenticity is actually possible until you get to this stage, because every single other stage in the first tier demands that you conform. So I think this is the first one that's is loosening up about that. This stage has no need to control others. The line is drawn not on people being who they are, but on the destructiveness that comes with many of the earlier systems. So where the first tier survival story strong arms people into conforming, the yellow meme system wants to bring out the best in each. So that's a big shift. The need and desire to use force goes away with this system. I think that the yellow stage is actually a shame healing stage, because it lets people be who they are. So the first tier in all of its stages demands conformity, and if the stage is not good for you, so example, the very aggressive ones would not suit me, then you struggle to live within them. Conformity and loyalty are strongly connected, and at this stage we start to unlink them. So you can live and let live at this stage, but many people in the earlier stages won't accept that approach, because rejection has such a stronghold in the first tier, which is highly hierarchical and authoritarian. And that's a reckoning that we have going on right now. With yellow, there's less of a need to try and make things work that don't. So it's freeing in that respect. It's called flex flow because it has an ecological perspective about differences. So it looks for ways to make things work without trying to force people and systems to be what they're not and cannot be. It is a starting over system, and we will go back to basics with it. And we'll also start to look for different ways to make life work for people and the planet. So the things that we don't need, I expect that all to go away. Eventually, people realize, though, that once they've developed some skills in working with the kinds of live and let live characteristics of this stage, the patterns, they start to realize that they can't do everything by themselves. They're not going to change the world by themselves. So they start looking for people that they can work with who are in a similar place. And I will point out that we don't know how these changes are going to occur. The deeply held hierarchical and authoritarian mindsets are holding on and not letting go, but they're going to have to. So the last stage we're going to look at is the turquoise stage. It's the first communal meme in the second tier. So it's like the tribal meme of the first tier. under a new theme of thriving. It serves the good of all with integrated systems. A person at this stage sees less as more. Global and global networking is routine. The person is able to be communitarian and respect individual rights. This is something that's been a problem. It seems to be either or, and we need to bring community and the individual together in a complementary and constructive way. That's something we still have to get to. It has a new spirituality based on the awe of the universe, and is comfortable with the mystery of life and the fact that you cannot ever know everything. So I think this stage may be beginning. I do see that at the global level, we're starting to see some efforts to deal with some of the issues like environmental and social issues that are not responding to local efforts. I think the EU in particular is looking at doing more, but time will tell. We'll see how it works out. So that's a brief journey through the human history via cultural systems, and hopefully it helps you begin to see the transition we're going through and why it's occurring, and some of the benefits like releasing shame and all of the things, toxicity from the past, releasing all of that and reclaiming your time and energy. It's an important benefit of this time. And it is important to note that we all carry all of the history as our foundation. And knowing about it helps you see what is useful now and what isn't. And so that is important for you to be aware of. So let me just see for a moment. Okay, so how are we doing? Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the key takeaways, just to sum it up a little bit, because we really have covered a lot of information, and I know it is a lot going through all of human culture. So this is the story of our evolutionary baby steps, and they've helped us to get where we are today, and hopefully you've gained some insight into our next step and our needs. We're in the process of multiple major shifts, from capitalism to egalitarian and ecological, from authoritarian to democratic, and from survival to thriving. These are very, very big changes. I think the work of the past can become a foundation for a new way of being, and that will ultimately be how we view it. Each system is a stepping stone, and each theme, like survival, is as well. And we have to release ourselves from the old story and invite a new one while valuing and respecting the knowledge and gifts of the past. Each cultural system claims our time, energy, identity, and voice. And because our systems have been built on legal and other formalities that make us the property of our families and our culture, many of us have not been able to claim our full voice as whole human beings. So if you have any shame around authenticity, you can give yourself a break. We've been made the extension of our social system and its demands, and therefore our authentic voice has probably been rejected quite often. And that is something we have the opportunity to reset because of the changes we're going through. So in order to claim our full richness, we have to make space for all that's been shamed. So when disloyalty is shamed, we have to give up our intelligence and self-determination, our freedom to move and to love. When weakness is shamed, as happens in the Red Empire system, we create blame, scapegoating, and victimization to avoid failure. We see a lot of that going on right now. When thinking for yourself is shamed, we cannot develop and bring our natural gifts to the world because we can't know them. And we cannot develop the wisdom that is a natural part of personal development. And then when need and vulnerability are shamed, we don't know when to stop because we can't acknowledge real needs and vulnerabilities. We cannot get our feet on the ground because needs that are real, like self-care, excuse me, or environmental ones, may not be recognized. And when rejection is shamed, we lose the skill of discernment and our agency to decide what would be healthy or not. Rejection shaming can also be discernment shaming. So this survival story has created hierarchical systems, and that means that there are class and caste systems that shift burdens, problems, and accountability, and which create a lot of resentment and have for a long time. Hierarchically oriented authoritarians who are adept at displacing responsibility are fighting change, and with it, their descent to being just like everybody else. There's also huge resistance to the idea that humans are not superior to nature and other humans right now, and that's also something we must come to terms from. We have to reconnect with nature and accept our place in it. And in spite of all the conflict, there's a lot of hope because the humanizing, regrounding, and healing work we are doing now and into the future will make life a lot easier. So now I want to talk a little bit about one of the most important skills we can develop, tending. So tending is actually a revolution in how we show up. These hierarchical systems that human culture has been built on have caused some people and some things to be more valued than others, and that applies to people as well as everything else in life. And hierarchies establish values and priorities that may not necessarily be good for us because many are exploitive. Now, our current system has carried exploitation of resources, including people, to quite an extreme. So we're living at a time of recovery from this cultural setup, and the important work of healing self-worth and the mind-body connection, though, doesn't change the underlying cultural dynamics, but it does make it possible for us to start opening to different ways of living. This extreme of exploitation is being challenged by necessity. Nature's in revolt, and by people also. And this is a good thing. I do believe we have a new story beginning where thriving and quality of life become our objective. So accumulation, hierarchical success, climbing the ladder, and all that kind of stuff is just not going to be so important. If you don't have food to eat, it doesn't matter if you have a crown on your head. And so this will bring a lot of change. It will invite a new and overlooked skill that can serve us well and is worth cultivating. And I call it the skill of tending, which is not the same as caretaking. Caretaking is generally a set of tasks. Tending is a way and intention around how we show up. We're already practicing the necessary skills for tending with meditation and other mindfulness practices, so you probably already have a head start on developing this skill. To flip the script on the devaluation of most aspects of life, we will need to do the opposite and make tending central to what we do. In other words, we have to revalue ourselves, nature, animals, everything. And so that includes restoring all that's been shamed, including whole groups of people to their rightful place. Tending is what we do when we're present and paying attention. Tending seeks to be informed. It seeks the truth to make good decisions. It accesses all of our intelligence. So tending is how we meet each moment to take care of what we need to take care of. Tending uses resources wisely, not denying the contributions of the past, the issues of the present, or the needs of the future. Tending is low drama and non-adversarial. It's very grounded, constructive. It serves the common good. It's a great energy for this transition to the green and yellow cultural systems. It's focused on creating quality of life and low in adversity, which makes it perfect for a world where creating thriving and quality of life is our goal. It gets rid of so much conflict. If we really want to thrive, we need a world open to the processes and skills to make that happen. Tending makes that possible. Openness, which democracy creates, is the very thing that older hierarchical and authoritarian systems block. Openness allows people to learn, grow, and have a voice. It means we can collaborate together. Being open is not necessarily easy. We all must work at it. It's one of the skills we have to develop. It enables us, though, to connect and work together to have a cooperative, thriving world, and also to build the trust that we need to work together over time. And just think of the joy we can have together doing this. So this, I believe, is going to be one of the skills that's going to help us in this new direction we're taking. We will be learning together. We're all beginners. So embracing the skill of tending is a great first step to enable you to get started in moving in a different direction, just step by step. That's one of the beauties of it. So now we want to look at some of the ways to navigate this transition to a different way. The first thing I would encourage you to do is to accept that the world will become very different. We'll be living in a different way, at a minimum, because the environmental issues will require it. When you're at the end of the story, like the survival story, basically you cannot maintain that story. You cannot save it. We can save all of the different things that have been built up over time, but we can't save the survival story. We need a new story. And so we're going to have to go from war-based to ecological-based systems, and that's a good thing. We'll have to shed consumerism in favor of quality of life. And so if you can see this change as good, as a way to shed toxic cultural systems of the past, they're unsustainable, that's a good thing. Being present and developing tending skills will make this easier. Next, recognize the shame issues we have discussed and separate yourself from them by thinking of them as ideas from the past that have no relevance today. They're meant to keep you attached to and trapped in older cultural systems. Shame is very painful. And the amount of shaming that goes on to keep people trapped is really quite something. And unfortunately, it keeps happening over and over again. So people keep getting re-traumatized. And that's really not an okay way to manage a culture. So invest in healing tools and modalities that will help you. There are many. Try to return the various forms of shame to their source if you can, perhaps by creating clearing or cord cutting ceremonies that separate you from the shame you have received. Get clarity about what it's all about. That sometimes helps as well. I mentioned the different kinds of shame around loyalty, weakness, thinking for yourself, need and vulnerability, and rejection. It's worth considering what shame messages you have received that you may need to address. Our natural intelligence shows us what to be loyal to, what is weak, and what is strong. Our energy, when clear, can guide us, knowing what is a real need and how vulnerability is good for us. And when that is, are all part of developing wisdom. So when you expose and release yourself from shame messages, you're actually building your wisdom. So, and that, by the way, when you see that you're doing that, it's very good for your mental health. Another thing I would suggest is that you simplify and streamline. One of the important priorities right now is to do that. Reduce your possessions, simplify how you use your time and energy. Essentially, you have to free yourself from the planned obsolescence that can drain your time and energy. It's essential to be as considered as possible in how you use your time, energy, and other resources. Our culture is still high consuming and wasteful of energy of all kinds, and we must become low consuming and resource smart. So this isn't about austerity, it's about being wise in our consumption, which is a healthy materialism. And to make that work, you need to invest in quality over quantity. I'm not talking about luxury, I mean well-made. Where in your life can you shift away from using things that break down easily? Position yourself to do well in a changing world by freeing yourself from depleting social and economic priorities. This is one of my top and ongoing priorities as I look for ways to eliminate everything I do not need. I'm doing this work myself. There was a saying in the 1980s, if you wanted to make money, invent a need. And we've been doing that to such a degree that we're destroying the planet and ourselves. And we're going to have to go in the opposite direction. So if you want to help yourself, you will reduce your needs to real needs as much as possible. And that will free your time and energy and money for other things. And it will feel positive and constructive. And you'll feel an inner strength that comes from that. And it will feel self-honoring and life-honoring. Next, take a look at connection. Because of the reaction and fight against change, this is a very precarious time, and you can protect yourself to a degree, and one way is through connection. So let's talk about several important kinds of connection. You want to connect with people who will be constructive throughout this transformation we're going through, not just online, but locally also. So doing so will give you the beginning of a community and a place where you can be part of an us that will be safe. Service and humanitarian organizations may be helpful. People in groups that are creating a new culture of thriving. Permaculture groups would be an example. Many of these individuals and groups exist under the radar. Also look for resources for meeting basic needs locally. The unraveling of capitalism will include a shift to localism over centralized production in many areas of life, like food. So you want to consider how that might be for you. I think that this unwinding of capitalism means that it's going to be really difficult to know when you'll be able to get your needs met or not. So securing your basic needs will be really important. Look for farms, community gardens. Those are options. Consider the weather issues for you, where you're going to need support because of adverse weather events. And thinking about through your needs in a basic area of life can be very calming, reduce your anxiety, and it's very self-protective. Next, see if you can develop some community skills and connect with community builders. There are skills to building communities. We live in an individualistic society now where we're taught to compete for everything. Community skills are going to be very different. So we've discussed the potential downsides of change, but there are also upsides. Community is a strong unmet need. And as the culture unravels, we will need a new community-based culture that will likely be bottoms up and local. In order to meet needs practically and sustainability, we will need to develop local economies that meet the basic needs of people, and that will reduce a lot of fear of needs not being met. There are organizations like Transition Towns that are working on creating sustainable local communities, and they're worth connecting with. And I also recommend to everyone that they get the newsletter from resilience.org. There's a huge amount of information in the writings of their many contributors about how to create the new world we're describing by people who are doing it and people who are actually grappling with the issues as they go through the process of trying to reimagine what life can be like. And you can learn a lot from their experiences. So I highly recommend you get that. I get that every single day, and I look through it to see if there's something that I can learn from. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, but I highly recommend it. It's very insightful. And then you also want to connect your gifts with these changing times. Now that you have a beginning understanding of the transformation we're going through, what changes do you think we need? Where do you think change will occur and how? How can you align yourself with the forces for constructive change? And how might your current skills and abilities contribute? Is there a home for you in this process? I bet there probably is. And where can you use your current skills? Take some time to find your place in a new, happier story. And then finally, I would recommend that you look to develop a joy practice. A joy practice is a focus on the good in ourselves, each other, and the world. It's constructive, caring, and serves the common good. It's the antithesis of toxic shame and authoritarian cultures, which attack the good in others to maintain the upper hand. Hierarchical cultures use rejection as a form of leverage. A joy practice and egalitarian cultures do not. It neutralizes social competition and embraces and supports the skill of tending. One of its great benefits when you develop it is that it not only removes a lot of toxicity from our lives, but also because of its focus and intention, helps remove a lot of insecurity. We have a lot of different kinds of insecurity. Insecurity from systemic issues, insecurity created by resistance to change, the insecurity that comes from so many unknowns, and the security that we're taught to develop in ourselves by people who try to keep us in place and small. We want to minimize that as much as possible while staying open to the positive that is possible as we rebalance to create a healthier world. A joy practice makes space for all of our gifts, including those that have been rejected. So it's very healing. It enables us to claim our voice and be confident about it because our intentions are constructive and caring. And that makes it possible for us to embrace new ways without the crippling self-doubt and shames of the past. And if someone tries to shame us, you realize it's their thing. It's amazing how a joy practice separates you from all of those negative and toxic energies and really highlights them as being not you. With a joy practice, the upper hand does not matter. Quality of life matters. It is important to understand that authoritarian structures rely on you. You cannot rely on them. That top-down arrangement is not suitable for the more complex and more educated world we live in, when what we need is an ecologically oriented culture. We need a cultural design that is suitable for our times and lets us build an ecologically focused human way of life. The earth needs it, and many of us are ready for it. So the priorities are different. It makes moot all of those actions and interests that are destructive in one way or another, and it makes life so much lighter and easier without falling into the trap of toxic positivity, which is just a form of denial. A joy practice meets the moment in reality in a healthy, constructive way, and it's freeing. It's a way to move into a new way of living. I consider it my anchor because it helps me make choices in spite of so many unknowns, which can be unnerving. I get anxious about it myself. So it's a practice like meditation with a constructive, caring intention that makes creating joy in a practical way my purpose and focus. So a joy practice neutralizes a lot of the difficult emotions that arise from the hierarchical systems because there's no one to be, no competition really, a lot of which has been an invention. It reshapes your yes and no muscles to be supportive and life enhancing rather than self-sacrificing. And it frees us from all of that baggage so we can be open to creating what we want and need, including a delightful world. I think that will be the end result. So once you step out of this current thing that we have going on, I'll call it a thing, you won't want to go back. So I hope that the idea of a joy practice feels nourishing to you. And there's one final point that I want to make about these times that we live in. I've explored some of the top focal points for making life work. They are mine. They're not just a recommendation. But I think that as I'm going through this change, one thing I'm noticing is that I feel this reset of my North Star. And I think that we are going through a reset of our North Star. I think that's one of the big transitions we're going through as a species as we move out of the survival story into a story of thriving. But because of so much conflict, destructiveness, and shaming, most of us have a difficult relationship with ourselves and each other. And whatever our natural inclinations, we often get co-opted by and have the survival story imposed on us. And even if we manage to dodge it to a degree, how many of us truly feel at home here? How in all the survival drama do you have time to anchor into the idea of Earth as your home? The good news is that shifting to a focus on thriving means that we start to relate to the Earth as our home, not just a battleground. The skill of tending I spoke about is a skill of investing our time and energy into making the planet our home and honoring it as our home. So much of our time and energy goes to competition and consumption and not to enjoying the sublime comfort and feeling of place of home that the Earth offers. Animals are good at this because they relate to the Earth as a home. But we humans seem to have a more difficult time. I'm generalizing, of course. Survival, fighting, competition, none of these activities help us create an Earth that is friendly to us or others. We need to create a friendlier world, and this change we're going through is about doing just that. The Earth has supported us for thousands of years, and now is insisting we chill with our consumption and develop a friendlier attitude towards this home we have, towards ourselves and each other, since we're a part of it. And I think in doing so, we will finally treat the Earth as a home that we share. And then perhaps we can put down the weapons and relax. I personally think it's about time. So this has been an introduction to the change we're going through and some of the changes that we can make to make life easier for ourselves in this coming year. I have covered a lot of territory. I hope you've found it valuable. The more you embrace the change, the easier it will become. The more you point yourself towards tending a joy practice and simplification, the more content and safe you will feel. And I suggest taking some time to imagine a different life for yourself, since it will help you to move forward if you can imagine a different and more beautiful way of life. I think life will become lighter, less intense, and more joyful when we get through this transition, and it is pretty ugly right now. Embracing the good it can bring you will invite the benefits sooner rather than later. And I hope this has been helpful, that you've discovered some changes that you can make for yourself in 2024 that will serve you well as we move through this difficult time. So I will be sending you the recording as soon as I have it available, and I will send you some tips on getting started. It's important that you have the opportunity to start to consider what a joy practice would look like in your daily life. We can talk about joy and a joy practice, but we also need the practical reality of integrating it into our lives before we can assess its value. What actions do you take? What do you feel? How does that feel? What changes for you when you do? I hope you will enjoy these tips, and I will be letting you know about more ways to integrate a joy practice into your life in the future, so stay tuned for that. And if you have any questions, please connect with me on the Magic of Joy website, magicofjoy.com, and in my social media. So I appreciate your taking the time to be with me today. It has been an honor for me to have you, and I look forward to talking with you in the future. And if anyone has a question right now that they would like to put in the Q&A, I will be happy to answer it for you. And if not, then I think we will go ahead and end the meeting. I wish you the absolute best over the holidays. And I look forward to sharing you some great tips on how to incorporate a joy practice and carry this conversation with you into 2024. So stay well, and I look forward to seeing you again.